Thank you for this hearing, and I appreciate the panelists being here. Mr. Blay, I wanted to dig a little deeper into a subject that many have talked about here, the Bank Secrecy Act, especially the currency transaction reporting. Back when I had a real life before I came here, I owned a small IT business, and because of the unbelievable complexity of our tax laws, I was unwilling to handle my own payroll, because I figured it'd be better to pay somebody else to be responsible than go to jail myself, right? So fortunately now we're hopefully addressing the complexity through our tax reform. But during that time period, the way we processed our payroll, which was twice a month, is I would actually do a wire transfer to the payroll processing company, which always exceeded $10,000. Quite often, I was also purchasing equipment that I didn't have an account with or credit with a equipment manufacturer, and so sometimes we were wire transferring $20,000, $30,000 to buy a piece of network equipment. The point being is I generated a lot of transfers of cash in the normal operation of business, and since 1970, and it was set at $10,000, we haven't adjusted that. And we began looking at this early on in the year. And of course, if you look at the rate of inflation, we should be at about $60,000 today, which I have been strongly advocating for. However, understand we need to strike a balance between what is reasonable amount to not overburden our financial institutions and what doesn't handcuff law enforcement. And I understand that the chairman's bill has that set at $30,000. Now, I spoke with some of the community banks in my district, and they really support this approach, especially the $30,000 level. So I think I'm going to be able to be okay with that. One of them said that 78% of their cash transactions are below $30,000. Another said 92% of their cash transactions are below $30,000. A third community banker in Georgia said they had 21 employees devoted solely to BSA compliance. 21. That's a lot for a small community bank. They file 67 CTRs a day, but they almost never receive requests for information from law enforcement based on a CTR. So my question for you is, do you think that this $30,000 does strike that balance to give regulatory relief and provide law enforcement the tools they need?
We believe it does. We don't get the information back to know how useful it is, so it's very difficult for us to put a hard statement on that. But what we think is important is whatever number we choose here, it's got to be accompanied with logical adjustments to the way in which this process works. There's one of the facts that we learned from mid-sized banks is it takes over 4 hours to file a SAR, to create the work on each individual one with $150 a month in one small bank. The amount of time to deliver the information is so difficult, is so time consuming, and moving to a structured and maybe even fully automated approach for delivering data rather than free text format and a story about the local company that's moving money totally legitimately would really be a benefit. So I think most important is 30,000, 25,000, they all seem like very reasonable numbers in today's dollars. But most important is that the program efficiency and effectiveness accompanies that. And there's a difference between the larger dollar and the smaller dollar.
What are the typical transactions we see that are below 30,000?
They're essentially the same types of transactions, but they could be ice cream parlors that are open in the summertime, moving money back and forth between branches.
Similar things I experienced in my business.
It's all the same kind of local businesses that are wondering why this is a question for them.
Another area that I've really been focused on here is when it comes to a cybersecurity concern, which is a grave concern right now. And when I was in the military, I worked in intelligence, and we lived by an adage, which is you don't have to secure what you don't have. Would this actually lessen the amount of data that banks are keeping on customers, reducing their risk in a cyber, and even passing on to the federal government, which is, of course, a grave cybersecurity risk, in my opinion?
It may reduce the number of detailed investigations, but all the data is still there, the systems are still there, and it's delivering alerts. It's just a difference with how much time is spent on the lower value-added information. And the goal of all of us is to focus the maximum attention on the things that matter most. But under the current program, we spend the same amount of time on everything.
Okay.
Well, your
Thank you,
gentleman's
Mr.
time has
Chairman.
expired.